So 5 years on from a dedicated speaker launch, we now have the Google Home speaker in hand. This is going to be the platform for Gemini for the next half a decade, but what's it like to live with? Let's get into it in this video. For deep dives though into the Google Home speaker and every Google product beyond that, stick around by hitting that subscribe button. I'd love to have you on board. Plus, I think it's a pretty good time. Cheers. So when this arrived at my home, I must admit, just about like any Nest product, the setup process is super quick and simple. From the unboxing to getting linked to my Wi-Fi, it was less than 10 minutes before I could actually start chatting with the new Google Home speaker. This will be slower if you actually have to link accounts and set up a home, but for those of us that are already deeply enrolled and entrenched within the Google Home system, setup and whatnot is super quick and simple. What I did find interesting though is how much information about this device is being held within the Google Home application compared to those previous devices. I heard a few plings and noises with a welcome or hello from the speaker itself, then not much else. I'm actually not sure if I'm remembering this incorrectly, but other Home or Nest speakers definitely felt more in-depth in the setup process once you did have a Google account linked. It's just something I noted when setting this up for the first time. As for the design, well, straight away, it strikes you as a Google product. I will say, firstly, the integrated cable is on the speaker side here rather than being fully detachable. I think the switch to USB-C power cables is great, but I actually wish it wasn't fully integrated into the unit or the chassis of the speaker itself, as I think this could limit placement for a lot of people. Myself is probably going to be included there. At 1.5 meters or 59 inches, the cable, it's not exactly the shortest, but it's not the longest either. And there are bound to be situations where I do think the nearest power outlet isn't going to be quite close enough for lots of people, which will limit where you can put this speaker in your home. I would have much preferred the same power plug-in method used by the Nest Mini, the Nest Hub and others, but with USB-C as a connection into the body itself, as I would choose the exact length of cable that I would want to suit exactly where I want this speaker to live. That said, the detachable 30-watt power brick is a vastly improved option over the integrated power brick. I'm not sure if it needs that full 30 watts, but it's 30 watts nonetheless. If you do have a multi-power port out there or a brick of your own, then that should work with no issues as well. I've tested this with a few and it seems to work just fine. I am though ultimately frustrated that the fun colours are limited to the United States for now. Plain black or that off-white porcelain, they're absolutely fine, I can't deny that, but I did have my eye on the hazel speaker as I think that would have fit a little bit nicer in my home decor. At least Google did stick with that soft touch fabric finish. It doesn't look or feel too drastically out of place, nor does it deviate from the previous generation. So if you really wanted to, you could just swap this out and it shouldn't be a problem. Just know that you will lose a little bit of the inconspicuous design as it is a little bit taller. I'd also say that if you happen to want to put it in the kitchen, stains might be an issue once again with that. I'm kind of wary of putting my porcelain model anywhere near my kitchen countertop for that reason. As alone as one splash with cooking or doing anything different, it will probably going to be stained for good, and that is something I don't want with this speaker. One of the biggest compliments that I can actually pay the Google Home speaker this time around is that it has passed the partner check, I'm calling it, and I'm actually free to put this in the living room TV cabinet or on top of that. As I quote, this is from my partner, "It looks like a fancy candle when you sat looking at it from the sofa," and that to me is high praise in my house. As for the lights that come with this, well, I do miss the iconic fall dot lights, which kind of have been part of my life for well over a decade at this point in time, but I do think the base glow feels much more futuristic and in line with what's going on with Google moving forward. I think this change does make a difference, as you can kind of see when Gemini is thinking or responding a lot more readily, and that wasn't as easy with the Nest Home or the Nest Mini, depending on the placement in your house or where you're looking at it from. At night, I also think this is quite useful, as when it gets dark, you can see it responding to you. The short Google rainbow color when a voice command is being initiated or the speaker is woken up, I think is a lovely little touch. I do really like this. Google also uses a bright white color when listening and a bluish color when it's reacting or speaking. It pulses and moves and it feels alive compared to the mostly static lights on the old Nest Mini. Another touch I really did enjoy with this new design. I would love though if we gained a visualizer or something similar for when music is playing back, as I think that would take full advantage of the lights in a way that older models could probably never do. Given the lack of screen, I'm actually surprised that this was overlooked. I'm hoping this will come with a future update. If you're out there listening Google, maybe add this in a future update. I'd love that. The button controls, well, they remain identical to the older Home and Nest speakers. Tap the right side to increase volume, the left to decrease, tap the middle to pause and play any audio. Super simple, and it's really nice to keep that consistency with this new version. So you're wondering about the sound. Well, the 58mm full range driver is a big step up over the 40mm driver in the Nest Mini, which I think is the most obvious comparison. But I do think if you are expecting Nest audio level listening experiences, then definitely temper those expectations. This thing sounds very, very good for its size, but it isn't going to match any high-end audio equipment. Even during setup, I will say I noticed just how much more full it sounds. However, it isn't as rich as I initially expected, given the driver upgrades. There is a distinct lack of bass, no real true oomph, as it were, when I listen to my favourite genres of drum and bass, or even some classic hip-hop or grime if you're here in the UK and you know that genre. As my colleague Andrew Romero can kind of attest to this, he's our resident audiophile, there is a muddiness present that I think might be disappointing to audiophiles out there, but I think if you are one of those, you probably wouldn't be buying this speaker expecting class-leading audio. I'll go a step further because I actually think the sound is almost identical to the audio experience on the Pixel Tablet Hub bass dock or the bass dock speaker. It seemingly produces the same audio experiences without obviously that 360 audio shape due to the size and shape of the speaker itself. At 100% volume, not something that I do listen to often, this is definitely a speaker that can fill a room, put it that way, and it doesn't crack or break too much at those high volumes, which again I think is a really nice addition to Google's audio options, especially with a speaker of this size. Sadly, I was unable to test the dual speaker setup which is touted with the Google TV streamers. You need two of these. I think that does feel like overkill, but it could be potentially a cheapish way to add surround sound to your home with some extra function baked in. But that said, $200, I don't know if everyone's going to be willing to pay that for two of these smaller speakers. So just jumping in here to say that I have had the update on my Google TV streamer now, so I can pair the solitary device, which you didn't expect this ahead of time. You can pair one Google Home speaker with this device if you want to. Choose the output option. It seems to sound fine. I don't necessarily think this is going to be great for anyone who has a decent audio setup for their TV, but if you do have two, I think you do want that dual stereo audio experience. As a mono experience, it's absolutely fine. It maybe mimics a cheap or low-end soundbar, but from my experience, it is a very nice process to get this set up if you do want to use it. As I say, might be an option if the TV audio that you do have on speakers on your TV are not that great. So I'll preface my Gemini talk with saying that I've been previewing Gemini in all of my existing home and Nest speakers for a pretty decent amount of time already. And what I can say with certainty is that in my experience, this for me is vastly improved over the creaking, groaning and barely updated Google Assistant. It's set to be abandoned in the future anyway. And that might not be the case for everyone out there, as I have seen complaints and issues over common controls missing, common controls not working as they should, online, in person, and yeah, in our comment sections. I cannot say with any certainty that you will have a better time making these voice requests, but I do think being able to use less explicit commands to do things like put on my favourite BBC radio channels, adjust the colour of the lights here in my office, heck, even setting multiple timers back to back while cooking, has been a really great experience from the very get-go. Asking multiple things at once or just correcting on the fly is something I've absolutely loved during the preview period. It definitely makes life so much better. And it does feel as though the Google Home speaker is faster than those older pieces of hardware, likely due to the improved internals. Google also wanted to highlight Gemini live chats, but I have to admit this isn't something I've tested as much as I would have liked with this speaker. I do use this all the time in the car, but in the kitchen, for instance, or in my office, I'm usually listening to music, podcast, or the radio, so it doesn't feel quite as in place as it probably should be. I have found cooking instructions useful on this speaker, but I do like to have a visual element tied into that, so I'm more inclined to just ask for cooking advice, not get a full recipe and go through that step by step. I do think your mileage may vary here, and I'm not saying it's good or bad either way. It's just it might not be useful to everyone, especially as this transition has had its problems for lots of people out there. And for that reason, the new Google Home speaker, at least in my experience, has just slotted right into the mix with that faster processing with the devices I've been using previously. The Nest Hub and the Nest Mini were probably my most used Nest devices. There isn't quite as much of a hang when you finish asking your question or making a request. Things, as I say, start almost instantly as soon as it starts. You can see the lights powering up. It does its thing, you get your answer in a lot quicker than those older pieces of hardware. I could foresee that being a little bit of a problem in some rare edge cases, but I will say that Gemini definitely handles interruptions or course corrections on this speaker vastly better than the input-output process that the Assistant relied on since those first-gen home speaker systems. And for me, Wi-Fi 6 connectivity has been the ace up the sleeve in my experience with this particular device. The connectivity boost has made a real difference to how I'm using this, especially when I tested it at the extremities of my home network. I do get quite a few dropouts on my Nest Mini when streaming music and radio in my kitchen. It randomly just stops, no reason why, even though I'm less than 10 meters away from my Wi-Fi router. All of those issues appear to be gone here with the Google Home speaker. It seems to be a fairly solid connection that means no waiting time for these things to initiate. It's not quite instantaneous, but it's about as close as it has been, especially with the Google Home speaker I've had to date. And given how the Google Assistant days are numbered, I kind of figured this would be a great time to launch activation with "Hey Gemini" or phrases of that like, but alas, we're still using the practically ancient and ubiquitous, trust me, I'm not going to say it, wake phrase that we've used forever. So yeah, it would have been nice to see Google launch that with this speaker, as it feels like a new dawn for Gemini on this form factor. I do think as well, updates and platform evolution are what are going to make Gemini a natural progression for the Assistant. I know many people are against this migration, but I do think in the long term, it will make for a better experience no matter which platform you do prefer. So I will say, to round this entire review out, there's undoubtedly a little bit of trepidation from me in recommending the Google Home speaker, not for its good components, no. It's mostly that it might not fit into the smart home that has been cultivated, or a smart home that's been cultivated around the Google Assistant specifically. Some of you will prefer the older one-way response request setup due to the simplicity and the explicitness of how that operates. Gemini is everything all at once, as it were, which I do think brings about its own hurdles that Google does have to iron out, or at least make those hurdles a little bit easier to jump over. It's definitely less bound by your requests, rolls, and rolls with the punches. Not everyone needs something to be so reactive, and I have noticed that while I like that it can do so much more, I'm actually falling back into the trap of just using the home speaker the same way I've used practically every home device to date. Turn off my lights, set a timer, play a song, play the radio, that kind of thing. I've got to ask, is that going to be enough for you to consider an update or an upgrade? It probably isn't going to be in most cases, but I do think this is still a small, compact solution for bringing Gemini into your home. Would I call it a replacement for the Nest Mini? Maybe not for everyone, but for now, I do think it hits mostly all of the right notes and at the right time. Let me know what you think, though, of this home speaker down in the comment sections below. Are you excited for it? Are you disappointed by it? As I say, I do think it's going to be a product for some people, not for everyone, which tends to be the case with smart home hardware anyway. Pick the system that works best for you, and I think you'll have the best time. But as I say, thanks for watching, and as always, I'll speak to you later.